My brother, who has always been jealous of my business success, started systematically draining my company accounts and redirecting client payments. When I confronted him, he produced a notarized statement claiming I had signed over power of attorney during a bipolar episode. I backed it down, apologized for my confusion, and announced I was taking a spontaneous week-long trip to an isolated retreat with no cell service. What he didn't see was the custom script I installed on my email server set to track and flag his IP address the moment he logged in to make the next fraudulent transfer. My company Novatech Solutions was everything to me. I had built it from a coffee shop startup into a successful mid-sized firm specializing in secure cloud services. My brother Adrian had always been my silent partner in title, if not in effort. Adrian, 2 years older, had watched my success with a corrosive mix of pride and profound jealousy. While I was pulling all-nighters closing major contracts, he was pulling threads on my personal life, always convinced I was undeserving. The trouble started subtly, a missing thousand here, a small payment redirection there. I initially blamed accounting errors, but the discrepancies grew too large, too frequent. When a six-figure client payment vanished entirely, I ran a deep audit. The truth was a punch to the gut. Adrian was systematically draining the corporate accounts and rerouting client funds to shell companies he had secretly established. The confrontation. I cornered him in the empty Novatech server room late one evening, surrounded by the humming racks that contain my life's work. "It's gone, Adrian," I said, my voice shaking with betrayal. "The Ascent contract payment, where did you send it?" Adrian didn't flinch. He leaned against a rack, a smirk playing on his lips, completely devoid of shame. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Alex," he drawled, using my childhood nickname in the most patronizing way. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was an official-looking document signed and notarized. "You remember last year, Alex, after you landed that big federal contract, the stress, the manic spending?" My heart plummeted. A year ago, I had a brief severe bout of work-related burnout that a doctor had tentatively labeled a hypomanic episode. I had dealt with it privately and moved on, but Adrian had clearly archived every detail. He unfolded the document. "This is a sworn, notarized statement. It says that during a severe bipolar episode, you, the CEO, voluntarily signed over full power of attorney to me, the only stable person in the family, for the duration of your instability. It's dated, witnessed, and notarized." The statement was a complete fabricated lie, a chilling display of foresight and malice. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had attacked my reputation, my sanity, and my legal right to the company I built. "I haven't been diagnosed with bipolar disorder," I whispered. "Try proving that in court while I control every bank account and every lawyer on your payroll." He countered, the paper snapping as he refolded it. "You tried to run the company into the ground, Alex. I was saving it." Retreat and the trap. The realization hit me. Any immediate aggressive legal action would be catastrophic. He held the notarized paper control of the funds and the narrative that I was unstable. He was banking on my emotional meltdown. I backed down. I forced a look of confused, beaten defeat. I apologize, Adrian," I stammered, rubbing my temples. "I've been so stressed lately. I must have had a lapse. I apologize for my confusion." Adrian's smirk widened into a full self-satisfied grin. He believed he had won. "It's fine, Alex," he said, patting my shoulder dismissively. "You just need a break." "I think you're right," I agreed, faking a spontaneous decision. "I'm going to take a break. A spontaneous trip. Somewhere remote, totally isolated. No phone, no internet. Just a week to clear my head. Maybe a retreat in the mountains." He bought it completely. The idea of me disappearing into an unstable, disconnected haze was exactly what he wanted. It would solidify his power. The moment he left the server room, I got to work. I had no access to the bank accounts, but I had access to the infrastructure. I used my administrative credentials to log into the main company email server and the client payment portal. I wasn't after a password. I was after his digital fingerprint. I spent the next 3 hours writing and installing a custom 3-line Perl script into the server's login sequence. This script was designed to do one thing the moment Adrian logged in using his specific credentials from his usual external IP address. The script wouldn't block him, but it would silently execute a command. The command, track and flag the IP address, log the specific account accessed, and trigger an automated encrypted email alert to Marcus Thornamy, personal private attorney, who Adrian didn't know about. I had no money, but I had the code. I didn't need to win the confrontation. I just needed to prove the moment of the crime. I logged out, deleted the logs, and walked out of Novatech, leaving Adrian in control of the financial heart of my company, completely unaware that the server was now silently watching him, waiting for his next move. The next morning, I put on a convincing show of spontaneous departure. I dressed in hiking gear, packed a ludicrously oversized backpack, and publicly announced my off-the-grid mental health retreat via a deliberately vague social media post. I even sent Adrian a final apologetic text, leaving now. Need to completely disconnect. Don't worry about the accounts. Focus on the clients. He responded immediately. Good. Stay safe, Alex. He'll handle everything. His smug satisfaction practically oozed through the screen. I drove out of the city, but instead of heading for the mountains, I drove 30 miles to a nondescript motel near a major freeway exchange. My retreat wasn't about clearing my head. It was about securing an alibi and waiting for the trap to spring. The waiting game. I checked into the motel under a false name, paid in cash, and settled into a room with terrible lighting and surprisingly fast, secure Wi-Fi I needed. I had a clean laptop, a prepaid burner phone for external contact only, and a direct, secure line of communication set up with Marcus Thorne, my private attorney. Marcus was skeptical, but intrigued by my plan. You're telling me you willingly handed him the keys to the kingdom and walked away? I gave him the illusion of victory, Marcus, I countered. He believes I'm mentally fragile and geographically isolated. He knows the clients are waiting on payments and he's greedy. He won't wait a full week. He'll want to move the next big chunk of money while he thinks I'm out of communication. I explained the server script I had installed. The moment he logs in from his home office, that server is going to give us two things: irrefutable evidence of the login time, and most importantly, his external IP address. That IP address is the digital equivalent of his fingerprint at the scene of the crime. The hook: Adrian waited less than 48 hours. The temptation of a $400,000 payment from our long-term client Vanguard Systems was too strong, and my supposed absence was too perfect an opportunity. On Wednesday afternoon, my clean laptop pinged. The secured connection to Alex Chen, my software consultant friend who helped me verify the script was running clean, came online. Alex Chen's voice was a low, urgent whisper over the encrypted channel. The script just executed. You were right. I held my breath. Details. At 2:47 p.m. Pacific Time, Adrian's specific administrative credentials logged into the main client payment portal, the one that handles the Vanguard transfers. The login was associated with the Novatech corporate network, but the external source was 172.683, and that IP address, it geolocates precisely to his private home office in the East Bay, California, the same office where he claimed to be saving the company from your instability. When Chen added, he then initiated the manual transfer and rerouted the Vanguard payment to the same set of offshore shell accounts used in the previous fraud. The trap was sprung. He hadn't just logged in, he had committed the next act of fraud, all while believing I was unreachable in the mountains. The next step. I immediately disconnected the call with Chen and contacted Marcus Thorne. Marcus, the trap worked, I said, my voice now tight with satisfaction. I have the timestamp, the login credentials, the specific action, the Vanguard transfer, and the precise external IP address connecting the crime to Adrian's home office. This proves two things. One, he is actively draining the accounts, and two, he is doing it after he claims he took over the company to save it, confirming criminal intent. This is phenomenal, Alex, Marcus said, his professional composure briefly giving way to excitement. The IP address is the smoking gun. It entirely debunks his power of attorney claim of necessary managerial oversight. He's actively embezzling while you're supposedly incapacitated. What's the next move? We move before the week is out. I'm filing an emergency injunction and motion for temporary restraining order TRO in federal court. We present the IP evidence, the forged notarized statement, and the financial audit. We shut down all his access, freeze the shell accounts, and seize his electronic devices. He'll be served with the TRO tomorrow morning, just as he's planning his next move. I looked out the window of the cheap motel. The sun was setting, painting the sky a fierce orange. Adrian thought he was securing my downfall. He had no idea his home office, the very symbol of his arrogant confidence, was about to be raided. My spontaneous retreat was over. It was time to return to the city and reclaim my company. The Server Trap, Episode 3. The Served Injunction. I spent the rest of Wednesday night finalizing the affidavit for Marcus Thorne. I detailed the confrontation, the forged power of attorney statement, my feigned surrender, and the exact process of installing the custom script. The evidence was irrefutable. Adrian committed a felony while believing his victim was geographically and mentally compromised. By Thursday morning, Marcus had the federal judge sign the temporary restraining order TRO and an accompanying warrant for electronic seizure. This wasn't just a legal slap on the wrist. This was a complete corporate lockdown. The morning blitz. The TRO was timed perfectly to hit Adrian just as he started his workday. I was back in my city apartment monitoring the situation from a distance when Marcus called. "It's done, Alex," Marcus confirmed. At 9:30 a.m., two U.S. Marshals and an IT forensics expert from our firm arrived at his home office in the East Bay. They served the TRO and the seizure warrant simultaneously. The TRO specifically ordered Adrian to 1. Immediately cease all financial transactions related to Novatech. 2. Relinquish all corporate access credentials. 3. Submit to the seizure of all electronic devices, laptops, phones, external drives related to Novatech or the shell companies. 4. Vacate the Novatech premises immediately. The best part, Marcus added. The marshals handed him a copy of the affidavit. He now knows exactly how you caught him. He knows you faked the mental breakdown and the spontaneous retreat. I pictured the scene: Adrian surrounded by official federal agents, seeing the IP address 172.6823.199 printed right next to the timestamp 2:47 p.m. The realization that his sister, the person he thought was too fragile to fight, had engineered his downfall using code he couldn't even see. Adrian's meltdown. Adrian, true to form, didn't go quietly. He immediately tried to claim the electronic devices were personal and protected. It took the marshals 45 minutes to secure everything, Marcus later relayed. He was screaming about the forged power of attorney, waving the notarized document, claiming he was the rightful CEO. When the marshals pointed out the TRO explicitly names him as the defendant in an embezzlement and wire fraud case, he collapsed. Crucially, the forensics team seized his laptop before he could wipe the hard drive. They would now be able to retrieve months of detailed communication with the shell companies he had set up. Later that afternoon, I returned to Novatech, walking past the security desk, which was now staffed by Marcus's security detail, ensuring Adrian could not re-enter the building. The office felt both strange and familiar. The humming of the servers felt like a silent, protective purr. Reclaiming the company. My first move was to execute a total security overhaul. Working with Chen and my core IT team, we, 1. Revoked all of Adrian's corporate credentials. 2. Sealed and audited every single account he had touched. 3. Contacted our major clients, starting with Vanguard Systems, to assure them the fraudulent transfer was reversed and that the perpetrator was contained. While I stabilized the business, Marcus was already planning the next phase: the civil suit for damages and the inevitable criminal prosecution. He tried to use the bipolar episode narrative to justify theft, Alex, Marcus said during our evening briefing. Now that we have the TRO and the seized evidence, we can destroy that defense. We have his full financial record, the stolen money trail, and his attempt to sell off company assets. I sat in my corner office, looking out at the city lights, no longer feigning confusion or defeat. Adrian had miscalculated everything. He thought my success was based on luck. He never realized it was based on an ironclad understanding of systems and security. He gave me a week to prepare, and I used that time to set a trap he couldn't escape. Let's not give him an inch, Marcus, I said. He wanted to take my company. Now let's make sure he loses everything. The days following the service of the TRO were a whirlwind of damage control and forensic deep dives. With Adrian locked out of Novatech and his devices seized, the immediate bleeding stopped. My focus shifted to cleaning up the financial mess and preparing the criminal case. The forensics report. The true extent of Adrian's treachery was revealed when Marcus's forensics team delivered their initial report on the seized electronics. It's worse than we thought, Alex, Marcus informed me during a secure video meeting. We have retrieved emails, encrypted chat logs, and financial spreadsheets from his laptop. This wasn't a spontaneous act. It was a year-long project. The report confirmed several key criminal activities. 1. Systematic theft. Adrian had systematically drained nearly $2 million over the last 18 months, classifying the transfers internally as consulting fees or server upgrades to conceal them from casual audit. 2. The forgery trail. They found the original digital template of the power of attorney document, including metadata, showing that Adrian had drafted and finalized the language himself before taking it to a specific compliant notary public. The entire notarization was fraudulent, giving us an immediate pathway to discredit his primary defense. 3. The shell company network. The chat logs revealed he had established a complex network of 10 offshore shell companies designed to launder the stolen funds and hide the money from tax authorities. 4. The final act. The IP-flagged login on Wednesday wasn't just about the Vanguard payment. The forensic data showed he was about to initiate the complete sale of a major Novatech server cluster to a third party, effectively crippling the company's infrastructure for quick cash. The IP address you secured was the anchor, Alex, Marcus concluded. It tied the fraudulent transfer directly to his location and his personal devices. The federal attorney is now pursuing a major wire fraud case separate from our civil suit for damages. The frozen accounts. My next victory came when Marcus successfully secured a court order to freeze all assets associated with Adrian and his shell companies. This included his primary residence, his luxury vehicle, and most satisfyingly, the offshore bank accounts containing the bulk of the stolen Novatech funds. Adrian was suddenly penniless, stripped of the ill-gotten gains he had stolen. The desperate plea. Later that evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Alex, it's me. It's Adrian." His voice was hoarse, stripped of all arrogance. He was calling from the payphone at the detention facility, having been denied bail due to the magnitude of the fraud and the flight risk posed by the offshore accounts. "You should be talking to your lawyer, Adrian," I replied coldly. "My lawyer says I'm facing decades in federal prison," he pleaded. "You can stop this. It's just a company, it's family. You said you were taking a retreat to fix your head show. Then you're stable. Tell them the notarized statement was real, that I was just trying to help." "You didn't try to help, Adrian," I countered, the years of silent resentment boiling over. "You tried to destroy me. You didn't just steal money. You tried to steal my reputation, my sanity, and the company I built with my own hands. You used a fabricated mental health crisis to justify your theft." "But we're family," he yelled into the phone, his desperation turning back into rage. "You're doing this because you know I was right. You're erratic, Alex. You'll ruin the company. The last person who ruined Novatech was the one who drained $2 million and was about to sell off our infrastructure." I stated, my voice sharp and final. "Your IP address put you at the scene of the crime. The forensic report confirms you plan to destroy the company. I'm not erratic, Adrian. I'm secure, and I'm coming to court with the truth." I hung up, severing the final personal link to the man who had been my brother. His desperate plea confirmed everything he still believed his lie and felt entitled to my hard work. The trap had closed completely. I had secured the evidence, froze his assets, and neutralized his narrative. Now it was time for the justice system to handle the rest. With Adrian's assets frozen and the forensic evidence secured, the civil part of the battle reclaiming Novatech was well underway. The next and most critical phase was the criminal prosecution, spearheaded by the United States Attorney's Office. I met with the lead federal prosecutor, Ms. Vivian Shaw, a woman whose reputation preceded her, methodical, relentless, and specializing in white-collar crime. Meeting the prosecution. The meeting was held in a secure federal building, a world away from the familiar hum of the Novatech server room. Ms. Shaw reviewed Marcus' compiled evidence packet, the financial audit, the IP trace log, the notarized forgery, and the forensic report detailing the stolen funds and the attempt to sell company assets. Ms. Shaw was impressed by the meticulous nature of my counter-strategy. "Mrs. Vance," she said, looking up from the documents, "your actions were highly unusual, but incredibly effective. You created an ironclad chain of evidence against your brother. The IP trace specifically removes any plausible doubt that someone else used his credentials." She outlined the charges: multiple counts of wire fraud, aggravated identity theft for the power of attorney, and embezzlement. Given the scale of the theft, $2 million, and the attempt to dismantle a viable business, the charges were severe, carrying a maximum sentence of several decades. The mental instability defense. Ms. Shaw immediately addressed the only possible defense. Adrian had left the claim of my mental instability. "Your brother's entire defense, as we anticipate it, will rest on that notarized power of attorney. He will argue he was acting as a concerned partner, saving the company from your bipolar episode," Ms. Shaw explained. "We will dismantle that in 3 steps. 1. Forensic proof. We will use the forensic data that shows he created and forged the power of attorney document before any alleged episode. The forgery predates the necessity. 2. The server trap. We will use your testimony and the IP log to show that while you were supposedly in an isolated retreat for mental health, Adrian was actively committing new acts of fraud, proving he was not engaged in managerial oversight, but criminal theft. 3. Medical records. Marcus will submit your clean medical history, completely refuting the bipolar claim. Your deception. Alex, while risky, was the single most effective way to separate his criminal actions from his false narrative," Ms. Shaw concluded. "We are confident we can secure a conviction." The damage assessment. After the criminal meeting, Marcus and I focused on the civil suit. We were suing Adrian for the full $2 million stolen, plus punitive damages and all legal fees. "We have frozen the funds, but recovery will be slow," Marcus cautioned. "However, the civil suit allows us to pursue his personal assets that weren't covered in the criminal warrant. We are going after his primary residence and personal investments." I didn't care about the money as much as the principle. "I want the company name completely clean," I told Marcus. "I want the criminal conviction to be the final word on the matter. When this is over, no client can ever doubt my control or my stability." Returning to normal. I left the secure rooms of the federal building and returned to Novatech. The office was calmer, the financial systems rebuilt, and the employees relieved. The fear of imminent collapse had been replaced by a quiet determination. My personal assistant, who had been completely loyal, approached me. "Alex, I just processed a delivery for your office." She handed me a small, anonymous package that had been delivered to the front desk before the TRO was served. Inside, I found a small, heavy silver locket. It was an old piece of jewelry from my childhood, something I thought I had lost years ago. Adrian had often teased me about it. There was no note, but the message was clear. "I have things that belong to you. I know your secrets." It was a petty final attempt to exert emotional dominance. I smiled a cold, unwavering expression. Adrian was locked away, stripped of his power, and facing decades in prison. The sentimental token was his desperate attempt to regain control. I placed the locket on my desk, not as a threat, but as a reminder. He thought he knew me, the fragile sister prone to panic. He never realized I was the one who controlled the systems, the logic, and the ultimate outcome. He had sent me on a fake retreat, and I had returned to deliver him a federal indictment. The federal case against Adrian moved into the discovery phase. Despite the overwhelming evidence provided by the server IP log and the subsequent forensics report, Adrian's lawyer, a high-priced but arrogant defense attorney named Mr. Vance, filed a vigorous motion to dismiss the defense tactic. Mr. Vance's entire defense hinged on proving the power of attorney POA was legitimate, thereby transforming Adrian's actions from theft into a necessary, albeit unauthorized, transfer of assets to stabilize a failing company. He scheduled a mandatory deposition requiring me to appear and testify under oath. This was his chance to break me down, force me into an emotional reaction, and confirm his narrative of my instability. The deposition was brutal. Mr. Vance repeatedly hammered me with invasive questions about my medical history, my stress levels, and my spontaneous disappearance to the retreat. "Isn't it true, Ms. Vance," he sneered, leaning over the table, "that you abandoned your company because you were experiencing an acute psychiatric break, and that your brother Adrian was simply doing his duty to protect the firm from your manic mismanagement?" "That is false," I stated calmly, maintaining eye contact. "I was conducting an internal audit that revealed my brother was systematically embezzling millions of dollars. The spontaneous retreat was a strategy to gain the time and distance needed to secure unassailable digital evidence of his criminal activity." "So you admit to an elaborate deception designed to entrap your family member," he challenged. "I admit to protecting my company from a corporate thief," I corrected. "Adrian's directive." During a recess, Marcus looked concerned. "Hayes is relentless. He's making the mental instability narrative stick enough to confuse a jury. We need something more concrete to silence him." That evening, we got the break we needed handed to us by Adrian's own arrogance. Adrian, furious that his lawyer was failing to discredit me, risked a communication breach from the detention facility. He smuggled out a handwritten note to his lawyer with a dangerous directive: retrieve the original backup drive. Adrian had a final personal encrypted backup drive hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer at the Novatech office, which he believed the marshals missed during the initial seizure. This drive, Adrian claimed, contained the original draft of my supposed power of attorney and a private self-serving memo he wrote months ago detailing his plan to take control. He wanted Mr. Vance to retrieve it and use it as proof of the POA's authenticity. The fatal flaw: Adrian's lawyer, blinded by his client's insistence and desperate for a physical piece of counter-evidence, took the bait. He filed a motion with the court claiming he had just located a critical, late-discovered piece of evidence at the Novatech office and requested access to retrieve it. Marcus and I were immediately suspicious. Marcus had already secured a complete lockdown order on the office. "Why is Adrian guiding him to a physical object now?" I asked Marcus. "Because he's desperate and he thinks the marshals missed it. He wants to prove his POA wasn't forged," Marcus deduced. "But if this drive exists, it will contain metadata confirming he created it, not you. He's walking right into the digital trap." Marcus immediately contacted the federal prosecutor, Ms. Shaw. They filed an opposing motion arguing that the drive should be retrieved by a neutral court-appointed receiver and immediately subjected to forensic imaging before the defense could touch it. The judge agreed. Mr. Vance was denied access. The unsealed evidence. A few days later, the report on the contents of the secret drive arrived. Adrian's plan to save himself backfired catastrophically. The neutral forensics team found exactly what Adrian promised: the original draft of the power of attorney and the private memo. However, the file's metadata confirmed two crucial facts. 1. Creation date. The file for the POA was created on a date 6 months prior to my alleged manic episode, proving the entire event was premeditated and planned to justify his future theft. 2. The memo. The self-serving memo explicitly stated Adrian's intent to use Alex's volatility to seize control of Novatech and redirect client funds. Adrian's final desperate attempt to introduce proof simply confirmed his deep-seated, premeditated criminal intent. Mr. Vance's defense was officially dead. The narrative of my instability was definitively shattered by the digital forensics that Adrian himself had led us to. My decision to back down and implement the silent strategic trap had led us to the IP address, which led us to the seized devices, which led us to the final damning piece of evidence from the secret drive. The forensic discovery of the secret backup drive, the one containing the premeditated memo and the metadata confirming the forgery timeline, was the final insurmountable hurdle for Adrian. His legal counsel, Mr. Vance, knowing the case was now a guaranteed conviction for federal wire fraud and embezzlement, advised him to change his plea. The plea bargain. 2 weeks after the forensic report was filed, Adrian appeared in federal court for a change of plea hearing. He was pale, defeated, and the arrogant glint was entirely gone. The reality of decades in federal prison had crushed his hubris. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of embezzlement. In exchange for the plea, the federal prosecutor, Ms. Shaw, agreed to drop the more complicated aggravated identity theft charge, which carried a separate mandatory minimum sentence. The plea deal was a functional victory for me. It secured the conviction and critically included a mandated agreement that Adrian would pay full restitution of the $2 million stolen and formally surrender all claims to Novatech Solutions. The sentencing preparation. Following the plea, the court scheduled a sentencing hearing. This was my final opportunity to address the court and define the true impact of Adrian's crime, not just the financial loss, but the personal and reputational damage. Ms. Shaw requested that I prepare a victim impact statement, a critical component that would inform the judge's final decision on the severity of the prison sentence. "This is where you explain the emotional cost, Alex," Ms. Shaw advised me. "He tried to ruin your reputation by claiming instability. You must address that head-on and make the judge understand the depth of the betrayal." I spent days working on the statement. It wasn't enough to list the stolen money. I needed to articulate the unique psychological violence of his crime, the final confrontation. The sentencing hearing arrived. I sat at the prosecution table, feeling the weight of the past year, the betrayal, the feigned collapse, the silent battle fought through servers and code. Adrian's lawyer presented a mitigated defense, attempting to paint Adrian as a concerned family member who made a terrible mistake. Adrian himself addressed the court, offering a monotone apology focused entirely on the financial loss. Then it was my turn. I stood before the judge, turned slightly so I could see Adrian, who sat slumped at the defense table. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. "My name is Alex Vance. I built Novatech Solutions from the ground up. This crime, committed by my own brother, was not merely theft of funds. It was an attempt at character assassination and corporate identity theft." I looked directly at Adrian. Adrian didn't just steal $2 million. He stole my reputation by creating a false narrative of mental instability. He forged documents claiming I was experiencing a severe bipolar episode, using a medical lie to justify his greed. He forced me to retreat, not because I was unstable, but because I needed to create an alibi to catch him. I detailed the discovery of the IP trace, the cold realization in the motel room, and the chilling moment I realized he was willing to destroy my future just to feed his jealousy. The worst damage was not the money, which we will recover. The worst damage was the attempt to make me doubt my own sanity and fitness to run my company, I concluded. But the digital evidence, the IP address, the metadata, the very server I built proved I was not unstable. I was strategic. Adrian Vance underestimated my competence and my resolve. He created a victim narrative for me, and I used that narrative to expose him as a felon. The appropriate sentence must reflect the severity of this psychological and criminal betrayal. Adrian looked up, his eyes meeting mine. There was no anger, only a vacant understanding of the completeness of his loss. I had used his own hubris, the very systems he thought he controlled, to deliver the final devastating blow. The judge, clearly moved by the unique nature of the betrayal and the irrefutable evidence of premeditation, took a brief recess to consider the sentence. The battle was over. The final accounting was at hand. The courtroom remained hushed after my victim impact statement. The judge, Honorable Miriam Steele, returned to the bench after a brief recess, her expression grave. The moment of final reckoning for Adrian was at hand. The sentencing judge, Steele, did not mince words. She acknowledged the meticulous nature of the theft, the blatant abuse of trust, and the calculated attempt to weaponize a false medical condition. "Mr. Vance," Judge Steele began, addressing Adrian directly, "the court has considered your guilty plea and the recommendations from counsel. However, the evidence presented, specifically the digital forensic record, including the IP address log and the premeditated planning demonstrated by the seized digital memo, shows a calculated long-term pattern of criminal behavior aimed not just at financial gain, but at the professional and personal destruction of your sister, the victim. She cited the severity of the financial loss and the attempted corporate sabotage. Therefore, for the charges of wire fraud and embezzlement, the court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison. The courtroom remained silent. 12 years. It was a firm, uncompromising sentence that reflected the gravity of the crime and the unique malice involved. Adrian's lawyer immediately moved to discuss the terms of